On the morning of May 9th, 1980, during a blinding thunderstorm over Tampa Bay, Florida, a massive freighter collided with the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. In seconds, over 1,200 feet of the bridge's main span collapsed into the water below. 35 people plunged 150 feet to their deaths in what remains one of the worst bridge disasters in American history. This is the story of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge disaster. The original Sunshine Skyway Bridge was a marvel of engineering when it opened in 1954. Spanning Tampa Bay, it connected St. Petersburg to Bradenton and the rest of southwest Florida. The bridge was more than just infrastructure. It was a symbol of Florida's post-war boom, a gleaming testament to progress and prosperity. The bridge consisted of two parallel spans. The original southbound span opened in 1954, and a second northbound span was added in 1971 to handle increasing traffic. Together, they carried tens of thousands of vehicles across the bay every day. The main spans rose 150 feet above the water to allow large ships to pass underneath. On a clear day, the views from the bridge were spectacular turquoise waters stretching in every direction, dolphins playing in the waves below, sailboats dotting the horizon. But on foggy or stormy days, the bridge could be treacherous. The high spans were exposed to powerful winds. Rain could reduce visibility to nearly zero. And the bridge's support columns, massive concrete pillars called piers, stood directly in the shipping channel, a potential hazard for any vessel that strayed off course. May 9th, 1980, started as an ordinary Friday morning for thousands of commuters. But at around 7 a.m., a severe thunderstorm moved across Tampa Bay. Rain fell in sheets. Wind gusted up to 60 miles per hour. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Despite the weather, traffic continued to flow across the bridge. Commuters needed to get to work. Trucks needed to make their deliveries. This was Florida. Storms came and went. People were used to it. At the same time, a massive phosphate freighter called the Summit Venture was navigating Tampa Bay, heading out to sea. The ship was enormous, 608 feet long and weighing 35,000 tons when fully loaded. It was carrying 28,000 tons of phosphate, bound for overseas markets. The ship's captain, John Lero, was an experienced harbor pilot who knew Tampa Bay intimately. He had navigated these waters hundreds of times, but this morning was different. The storm was worse than expected, and it was intensifying. As the Summit Venture approached the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, visibility deteriorated to near zero. Captain Lero couldn't see the bridge, even though it was directly ahead. He was navigating by radar and his knowledge of the bay, trying to thread the massive ship through the narrow shipping channel that passed between the bridge's support columns. Then, without warning, the ship was hit by a powerful gust of wind, possibly a microburst, from the storm. The Summit Venture lurched sideways, pushed off course by forces the captain couldn't control. Lero immediately ordered the engine's full reverse and dropped the anchor, desperately trying to stop the ship's forward momentum. But it was too late. The Summit Venture was moving too fast, and it was too close to the bridge. At 7:33 a.m., the bow of the Summit Venture struck the southbound span of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. The collision was catastrophic. The ship hit one of the main support piers with tremendous force, 35,000 tons of steel and cargo moving at several knots. The impact was so powerful that it completely destroyed the pier and knocked out a neighboring pier as well. Without support, over 1,200 feet of the bridge's main span, the high section that crossed the shipping channel, collapsed into Tampa Bay. Steel, concrete, and asphalt tumbled into the water in a massive cascade of debris. And vehicles went with it. Cars, trucks, and a Greyhound bus that were crossing the bridge at that exact moment suddenly found themselves driving into empty air. There was no warning, no time to brake, no chance to turn around. One moment, they were on a bridge. The next moment, they were falling. The southbound lanes collapsed. Vehicles plunged 150 feet into Tampa Bay, hitting the water at deadly speeds, or crashing onto the deck of the Summit Venture below. Some vehicles struck debris on the way down. Others sank immediately upon impact with the water. 35 people died. 35 people who were just driving to work, who kissed their families goodbye that morning. who had plans for the weekend, who had no idea they had minutes left to live. Among the victims was a Greyhound bus carrying 26 passengers. The driver saw the gap too late and couldn't stop. The bus plunged off the edge and sank. Only the driver managed to escape. 26 passengers drowned, trapped inside as the bus filled with water. There were cars with commuters heading to their jobs. A truck driver making a delivery. People whose names we know and people whose identities took days to confirm because the impact was so violent. But there was also a miracle. Wesley McIntyre was driving a pickup truck across the bridge when he felt the roadway begin to shake. He saw cars ahead of him disappearing into nothing. He slammed on his brakes and skidded toward the gap. His truck stopped right at the edge, literally at the edge, with his front tires hanging over empty space. McIntyre sat there, stunned, staring down at the wreckage 150 feet below. If he had been going 1 mile per hour faster, he would have gone over. If he had braked 1 second later, he would have died with the others. Behind him, other drivers had also managed to stop in time. They got out of their cars in the pouring rain and stared at the massive gap where the bridge used to be. Some dropped to their knees. Some vomited. Some just stood there in shock, unable to process what they were seeing. Emergency response began immediately, but the conditions were nightmarish. The storm was still raging. Visibility was terrible. The water was churned up and dangerous, and the sheer scale of the collapse made it hard to even understand what had happened. Coast Guard vessels rushed to the scene. Divers entered the water despite the poor conditions. Helicopters searched for survivors. But it quickly became clear that there would be few, if any, people to rescue. Most of the victims had died on impact, either from hitting the water at over 75 miles per hour, from striking debris, or from being crushed inside their vehicles. Those who survived the initial fall drowned as their vehicles sank. The force of hitting the water from that height is equivalent to hitting concrete. Very few people could survive it. Recovery operations continued for days. Divers worked in dark, murky water, searching through twisted wreckage. Bodies were recovered one by one. Some vehicles were never found, buried in the silt at the bottom of the bay. The entire nation watched as the story unfolded. Images of the collapsed bridge with that massive gap in the middle and Wesley McIntyre's truck teetering on the edge were broadcast around the world. It was a stark reminder of infrastructure vulnerability and the thin line between life and death. The investigation began immediately. How did this happen? Who was responsible? Could it have been prevented? Captain John Lero, the harbor pilot of the Summit venture, was devastated. He insisted that he had done everything possible to avoid the collision, that the storm and the sudden wind gust had made the accident unavoidable. He cooperated fully with investigators and submitted to questioning. The investigation ultimately concluded that while Lero had made some errors in judgment, particularly in deciding to proceed through the channel in such poor visibility, the primary cause of the disaster was the severe weather, specifically the sudden wind burst that pushed the ship off course. Lero was not criminally charged, though he faced civil lawsuits, but the psychological toll on him was immense. He had been at the helm when 35 people died. That burden never left him. He suffered from nightmares and depression for the rest of his life. John Lero died in 2002, still haunted by that terrible morning. But the investigation also revealed a deeper problem. The bridge itself was vulnerable. The support piers stood directly in the shipping channel with inadequate protection. There were no dolphins' protective structures designed to deflect ships away from the piers. The bridge had been designed in an era before anyone seriously considered the possibility of a large ship collision. In the aftermath of the disaster, Florida officials made a decision. They would not simply repair the old bridge. They would build a completely new one, designed with modern safety standards and engineered to withstand ship collisions. The remaining sections of the old bridge were demolished. Construction began on a new Sunshine Skyway Bridge, one that would be safer, stronger, and more beautiful than its predecessor. The new bridge opened in 1987, just 7 years after the disaster. It was and remains a stunning piece of engineering. The main span is a cable-stayed bridge with a single massive pylon reaching 430 feet into the air. The design is elegant and distinctive, The bridge has become an iconic symbol of Florida. But more importantly, the new bridge was built with safety as the top priority. Massive concrete dolphins surround each pier, designed to absorb impacts from ships and protect the bridge structure. The shipping channel was repositioned for better navigation. The bridge can withstand hurricanes and was built to last over 100 years. The new Sunshine Skyway has been remarkably safe. In the decades since it opened, there have been no major incidents. Ships pass underneath daily without incident. The protective dolphins have absorbed several minor collisions without damage to the bridge itself. But the new bridge couldn't erase the memory of what happened on May 9th, 1980. Today, sections of the old bridge approaches remain standing, converted into fishing piers. The Skyway Fishing Pier State Park. People fish from the very structure where 35 people died. Though most visitors don't know or don't think about the history beneath their feet. There is no official memorial at the bridge itself, though there have been calls for one over the years. Families of victims have held private remembrances. Some leave flowers at the fishing pier on the anniversary. The memory is kept alive by those who were there, by those who lost loved ones, and by a community that doesn't want to forget. The Sunshine Skyway disaster changed how America builds bridges. It led to new engineering standards, new safety requirements, and a new awareness of the vulnerability of infrastructure to ship collisions. Similar protective structures were added to other bridges around the country. Bridge design evolved to account for worst-case scenarios. The lessons learned from Tampa Bay saved lives elsewhere. But for the families of the 35 victims, no amount of improved safety can bring back what they lost. A mother, a father, a son, a daughter gone in an instant. Because they happened to be on that bridge at that exact moment when a storm and a ship converged in the worst possible way. The Sunshine Skyway disaster is a reminder that tragedy can strike without warning. That infrastructure we trust with our lives every day can fail. That nature is powerful and unpredictable, and that even with the best intentions and the most experienced people, disasters can still happen. The new bridge stands as both a triumph of engineering and a memorial to those who died on the old one. Every time someone crosses it safely, every time a ship passes beneath it without incident, it's a testament to what we learned from that terrible morning in 1980. The Sunshine Skyway Bridge is beautiful. It's safe. It's a source of pride for Florida. But it's built on the memory of 35 people who never made it to the other side, and we should never forget them.